All right, this is a super quick video on refreshing our memories on how to use apostrophes correctly. And I know for some of us, it's using apostrophes correctly is like the bane of our existence. So here are 4 quick things to remember when you're trying to figure out whether or not to use an apostrophe at the end of your sentence, and so that it's not just an arbitrary, well, there's an S at the end of my word, so I think maybe now I'll use an apostrophe. You want to be purposeful. So first, this is, you use an apostrophe when you're using a contraction, okay? So these are words like don't, let me put it down here, don't, let's, there, that there, we're, okay? We're very familiar with these. So anytime you're joining 2 small words together and taking one of the, a part of one of the words out, you're replacing it with an apostrophe. Okay, simple enough. Now it starts to get tricky when we talk about possessive words. So if the word has an S at the end and something is possessed or being owned by that noun, then you use an apostrophe. So if we said Andrew's house, okay? Andrew owns the house. It's his house. We use an apostrophe. It doesn't have to be for a concrete object either. So it could be the flower's beauty, okay? Now, it's not like the flower has, a suitcase with beauty inside or something that it's taking with it somewhere. It's kind of inherent. The flower has that beauty. The flower owns that beauty. So you would use an apostrophe S for that. Okay, it gets even trickier when you have possessive plural words, okay? The only tricky part, though, is that the apostrophe just goes in a different place, okay? So if I were talking about several flowers' beauty, if I had a garden full of tulips, okay, I would say something like the flowers. I make it plural first. There are multiple flowers, and then I just put my apostrophe at the very end. The flower's beauty. And you pronounce it the same way, but the hope would be that within the context of your sentence, it would be clear that you're talking about plural flowers and not just a single flower. So another example might be teenagers' busy schedules. Okay, same thing. If you're talking about like teenagers in general and the busy schedules that they own, they have, it's their busy schedules, then you're going to make your plural word first, teenagers, plural, and then add your apostrophe at the end. That's the signal to indicate you're talking about more than one teenager. Okay. Now the 4th, we've talked about contractions, possessive words just in general, possessive plural words, and then the last point I want to make sure you remember is that you don't use an apostrophe if you just have a plural word, a plural noun where there's more than one of the noun. Okay, so if you said the flowers were planted in the backyard. Okay, the flowers don't own anything here. Okay. Typically, and I can't even think of an example, unless you put like an adjective in here, typically the thing being owned for the possessive is going to come pretty soon after the noun, okay? So here, the flowers are just multiple flowers being planted in the backyard, okay? So no apostrophe needed. Even if you said something like this, the teenagers had lots of homework, okay? Now, I think what sometimes people get tripped up on is the fact that the sentence itself is saying that the teenagers have something, right? They have homework, so there's possession there. They own something. However, the way the sentence is structured, it's not saying like the teenagers' homework was insane, okay? That's where homework would be coming right after the possessive noun, okay, or the plural noun, which means it's possessive. In this case, you're just using the teenagers as the subject of the sentence. The teenagers had homework, okay, or lots of homework. So in this case, still no apostrophe here, okay? This one would be correct because you're talking about the homework that was owned by the teenagers right after the teenagers. And actually, in this case, the teenagers is kind of describing the homework. That's another way to look at it. The homework is the subject of this sentence. In this sentence, teenagers is the subject of the sentence, okay? If that makes sense. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't, then just disregard those last few sentences. But the things you need to know for apostrophes, if you get tripped up on them, contractions, always for contractions. Possessive words, just in general, if something is being owned immediately or soon thereafter, the possessive noun. Possessive plural words, you still use an apostrophe, but it comes after the S. And then you don't use an apostrophe for words that are just plural, if there's just more than one. And I guess the last, number 5 thing I can help you remember is its versus its. This version of its, without the apostrophe, is actually possessive. It's the possessive form, because it's with an apostrophe is it is. Okay, so if you were to say, it's super cold outside, that actually translates to, as we know, it is super cold outside. Okay, and I don't know if it's to avoid confusion, or I'm sure we could do some research and find out why the possessive form of its is the one with no apostrophe, but that's just the way it is. So if you were saying the dog wagged its tail, the dog owns its tail. Okay, so that's possessive. You wouldn't replace that with it is. So that's your test to see if you need another test. So there's no apostrophe there. Okay, those would be your 5 rules to remember. I encourage you to use, if you struggle with apostrophes, check the practice sheet out that's in the folder.